Hello and welcome to the second meetup with the Formbird Clarity Water Professionals community. I welcome the people who have joined us and those watching this recording in the future. My name is Mark Hosking. I'm CEO of Formbird. Formbird is a low-code platform that we build a range of enterprise applications on. Our vision is software that moves an organisation's data from collection to communications. The water professionals community is a place where water professionals and clarity users from across Australia come together to discuss common issues and share their domain knowledge with each other. As part of the community, please feel free to ask questions when they arise and have your say when you feel the need. Well, welcome everyone. I think that we've just done a quick introduction. I think Sean, just introducing Sean. Sean's also from Bundaberg. What's your official title now, Sean?
Process and Asset Manager.
Right. Okay, yeah. Cool. And we've got Josh from Central Highlands joining us today, which is fantastic. So look, it's probably the beginning of the year and we're kind of a little bit flying by wire today in terms of what we're going to try and cover off. And a lot of it we'll try and throw it to the floor and also look at what we're going to be looking at during the rest of the year, or at least next session, or anything you want to specifically do. But what I thought we'd do is we'll do just a couple of updates and just talk about what's been going on our side. I suppose from a technology point of view, from a project point of view, etc. And then, of course, it's an open floor. Always throw in questions. Don't hold back. It's really intended to be a true catch up, not a lecture or a one-way presentation. So just I suppose a couple of things in terms of our technology development. We're continuing with the Angular upgrade, which is certainly progressing along. We're down to about 5-6 sort of what we would call major issues from a Greater Western Water point of view. The plan is to be live just before Easter for them. So that bringing back the dates, it'll be UATs and all the rest of it. In terms of just quickly giving you a sort of quick little feel for what it's looking like. And I suppose we've got Josh here, and I suppose just to let a few people know who don't understand what's happening. Can you see my browser there? Is that up and going? Okay, cool. So just a little bit of background. When we first released Formbird as a technology, we were on what was called Angular in those days, which was later renamed Angular JS. It's a technology out of Google. As it was a very early a construct, if you like, or technology out of Google that was really a framework. It's a Java, what's called technically a JavaScript framework. Quickly after they released that, there was a whole run of similar frameworks being released, and Google really took that opportunity then to do a complete redevelopment. And now we're on what's called Angular, just purely Angular, not Angular JS, and it's actually virtually a complete new technology. We've actually had to rewrite basically everything underneath, and we've taken that opportunity. We actually spent 6 months back in 2018, or actually nearly 12 months, 2018, looking at other technologies. It was such a big difference. So it's a really major upgrade. It's also a major upgrade to the point where we really wouldn't see that we probably wouldn't be doing a similar major upgrade for another, 8 to 10 years. This is kind of, a major platform from a Google point of view and a framework point of view. I suppose the sort of advantages we've taken, or the technology upgrades that really a user will see is primarily around performance. It behaves more natively on mobile apps as a mobile. It looks more like a mobile app in the mobile environments. We also have taken the advantage of being able to adopt other technologies from other providers. So there's other frameworks. Facebook has one called React, which we can actually use there, and Facebook is really strong on the UI, on the GUI, so really presenting, components, our components, if you like, and we've really made it so that we can really adopt components far easier and really leverage more third-party components, whether they be open source or commercial components, and really plug them in. So, this is probably one of our largest forms. It's the case form for Greater Western Water. There's a hell of a lot of processing going on in terms of just lookups and presenting spatial data. You can see that it loads quite smoothly and relatively quickly. That's probably on the outside, the most obvious capability or function for users. There's a whole lot of other things. We've always had the capability to go offline, but we've never really had a customer take it offline properly. So we've spent a lot more time working on the offline element of the Angular version. So we're hoping to get some customers truly offline with that. So yeah, it's quite a technology jump for us, and it's been a lot harder than probably what we expected. Primarily because we've really had to remain fully compatible with our previous version, if you like, and that's part of the sort of challenge and the advantage from our customers' perspective. You guys are going to see a major technology upgrade, yet your applications will remain compatible with that technology. So it gives us that independence between technology and business applications. And that really, is a pretty significant capability, because it really doesn't mean that the application is stuck in the technology that the application was originally built in. And that separation, you can sort of think of it like, the example I often use is things like Excel. A spreadsheet from 30 years ago, 20 years ago will pretty much open in Excel today, even though the actual framework, being the application, being Excel itself, has changed a lot over that time and added features and all the rest to it, but you can just take advantage of it. So that's that separation between function and application, and the function being defined in the database itself. So there's been a lot of work in that. I'm going to hand it over to Lockie and to Grant. There's been some work done on selected asset in the Angular version. Selected asset, for those guys, I suppose, is the heart of our kind of water assets, or any of our spatial, which is really, the ability to present spatial data as need be, select the assets, interact with it, provide pop-ups and all the rest of it. Here we're showing the shut-off block network, all sorts of things. So it really gives us that sort of core capability we use throughout the whole application. One of the new features we've just added is the ability to present data from a web service. So the ability to query an external data source and present that live. So what we've done there is use that base capability then to present live vehicle data. So connecting into Geotab, which we're using in the fleet application, to present vehicles on the, if you like, the asset maps. But it's a more generic capability, in fact, because it does mean that we can do other queries to present data. So whether it be maybe IoT data or whatever, it can incorporate external data sources in a live sense back into that visualization, if it's got some sort of spatial element that we want to present. So Grant, do you want to take the share and perhaps show a little bit about what we've done there? And
yeah, so what I'm showing here is our outage map. And this is just the first proof of concept demonstration of this ability to configure a layer, with the external data. And this happens to be Lockie's vehicle here at the Kensington Road depot. We'd be able to, show him driving around, except you can see him just sitting there at the moment. So unfortunately, we can't show the position updating as it goes along. But at the moment, this is a proof of concept that we've been working on, and we've only actually got a couple of vehicles with the tracking devices in them. So, what you can see here is that we're showing the vehicle in context along with a whole bunch of the sewer and water assets, and this particular page is actually used for seeing where cases and actions and outages are occurring, and just in the overall network. So you can type in an address to get close to an area. You can see, for instance, I'm just turning these layers off. It's not going to work for me at the moment. There's still some work going on with this asset, with this selected asset with the upgrade, but the intention is that you can see other cases and actions taking place, like this here and this here, and you can see the vehicle in the context of it. So you can imagine then that what we can do is we can configure it such that we make a call to the web service and say, where's the vehicle that's associated with this in tray? And then on a responsive case responsive case, we could actually display where that vehicle is in relation to the address that the case is taking place at. See whether it's actually on site or whether it's, you know, somewhere nearby. So this is very handy for like the OCC. If they're taking calls, they can say, hey, the truck's just around the corner, it'll be there soon. But, you know, all these kinds of things. I don't know if you want to chime in there.
Yeah, I think also the other benefit is that there'll be filterable attributes as well. So whether the vehicle's on shift, off shift, like obviously you can see my vehicle parked there, but you know, if I was on night shift, we'd be able to filter it out saying that it's unavailable. So rather than just showing all data, it's another subset of information that we can filter out. So for our dispatchers or our response crews, knowing that there's vehicles in the area that have the right attributes, they may be a sewer crew, a water crew, they might be a response officer who's literally just driving around in a vehicle with limited tools. It will really help with the guys in the field or the dispatchers knowing who's around and who's next available. So we do see it as a precursor to a fully optimized solution where the system itself would be able to say, you know, there's a responsive water case at JJ Holland Park. We can see that there's a water crew whose status is active, but they're not on site for any other job. That would be the next, or it would be the obvious crew that you'd want to send there. So we envision a system that uses this information to inform our dispatchers not only of what crews are in the area, but what's the most suitable, and eventually get to the point where they may be able to automatically schedule those jobs to those crews and dispatch on the fly.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah. So so I think we're close to having developed the proof of concept and solved the technology issues, but we may have some industrial issues that we have to work through before we can actually get this you know, into the application. But that's an emerging story.
Yeah, so essentially what we're proving here is that, yes, we can interact with the API, we can have all the attribute data set. There will obviously be some limitations within companies. I think last time that we mentioned this, we were talking about whether your EBA allows for tracking of vehicles and that type of thing. So obviously that's a company by company decision. But what this will prove is that if you have vehicles that are able to be displayed, then in real time you'll be able to see them moving around in your works management system. So everyone has an operation center where you can see, well, here's the jobs that we have on hand, and there's quite often another, like a Tracknology or another tracking system that you look at on another screen. This will simply show that if you do have the ability to track those vehicles, that you'll be able to see them within the applications, and essentially with the controls that we have within Focus, we'd be able to say, well, I'm only a low-level employee. I may only be able to see where my own vehicle is. Dispatchers may only be able to see on-shift vehicles, whereas works administrators may be able to see all vehicles based and allocate them based on their roster, that type of thing.
Yep.
Any questions or thoughts?
No worries.
All silent.
Yeah. So the next item, which Lockie can also talk to a bit, is the abnormal voltage. So I think last time we talked about aggressive interactions, and I think everyone probably saw that pop up when Mark was demonstrating the angular upgrade. We've now extended that to include a risk for abnormal voltages, which Lockie might want to explain a bit more about.
Yeah. So if you flick over to that one.
I might go to that record. Yeah.
So essentially the issue that we have in the field is that we have a history, especially in our older areas of abnormal voltage readings across our water meters. And what that stems from is if we don't have an earth spike, then a lot of the old electricians or some of the less reputable electricians will often just attach straight to the copper of the house and take an earth through the service connection itself. The current field practice is that we have abnormal voltage detection units. So before any water meters are replaced, the crew will attach on both sides of the meter. It will detect whether there's an abnormal voltage across there. If there is, it would indicate that if they were to break that connection, they may themselves become the earth. So essentially, we're trying to stop people becoming extremely hurt or even a fatality. The current process that happens in the field, and it happens really quickly because it is such a significant issue, is that when an abnormal voltage is detected, the person on site calls into dispatch. Dispatch then calls Power Corps or the responsible authority in the area for electricity, and they will remain on site until that issue is rectified. So a electrical contractor will come out, they'll do rectification work, and they will essentially advise us that we're safe to proceed. What we're capturing here in the same way that we are with the aggressive customer interactions is essentially a way that even though we know the power company is on their way or they're aware of the issue, that we can record it. So same process comes through, the AVDD ticks off, we can record that information saying that we've captured an abnormal voltage. We can capture the details of that abnormal voltage. We can capture that we've notified the distributor, and we'll capture that information. When the distributor turns up, so the Power Corps or AusNet, whoever turns up, we can record that as well. And when they sign off saying this site is now safe, we will tick that box and we'll be able to undertake works. So what this essentially is doing is not only putting in a recording information so that we can say, all right, how many AVDDs have we had? We can actually capture the stats, the response times of the power distributor, the customers impacted, and also it allows us to flag those cases and say, if the address, so 216 Kensington Drive, it's had a previously recorded abnormal voltage, it will be flagged up whenever anyone raises, until Power Corps gives us the go-ahead that the site is now safe. Whenever anyone raises a case or an action, or anyone attends an existing case or action, the first thing they'll see is a pop-up saying, this area has been identified as having an abnormal voltage. There'll be a big warning barrier, there'll be a pop-up that they'll have to essentially sign off on. So even though the current practice is that a response officer stays on site, in those instances where they may have to leave, or if it's going to be a 2-hour wait and they go down the road, that kind of thing, if another job comes up at the same time, then yes, it's just a warning at this stage, but it's a banner, it's a warning, and we can put a hard stop on people actually undertaking any works until that box has been ticked saying that the power provider has turned up, that they've deemed it safe, and then we can record those details.
So I think everyone saw the pop-up there as Lockie was talking. Ignore those red errors, they're from our development environment, but so we end up also with this little table here that gives you a link off to the relevant record, which is the document we were looking at in the first place.
Hey, Lucky, who fills us in? Is this the guy in the field or the person in the office?
No, guy in the field. Everything that we want to create is to make it as user-friendly as we can. So the guys in the field have a device. They can say, yep, this is the time I recorded it. This is when I called Power Corps. This is when Power Corps turned up. This is who turned up. And this is the time that they said it was safe. So it's the user on site.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and just to that, so there's 2 locations, actually 3 ways of creating a record, but probably the most common one's going to be this one from within the action. So you just select here that you want to report it, and it'll open up the report tab in here, and you just complete the details. So that's accessible within the action that the guy's been assigned.
And this is in Angular at the moment, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
again, there's no reason that we couldn't have done it in the current environment like we did with the aggressive interaction. It's essentially using the same principle, but following on from there. Because it is filled in by the field workers, doesn't necessarily mean it can't be done by the office. So if the guy is out in the field and his device is flat, then again, there's no reason this can't be filled in with anyone with access to the system.
Yeah, so in fact, just to that, when the case is raised in the first instance, if it's reported, if somebody's reporting that they were zapped, when they ring it in, we can also tick this critical information, and then we've automated the creation of the action, such that then when any new case is raised, any new action is attached to this case, it'll automatically show the warning as well.
And we've tried to make it as, we don't want to make it onerous for the guys. It's obviously a safety thing, but realistically, all they have to fill out at time of reporting is when they reported it and how they reported it. So it'll be detection method. So whether it was ABDD or someone called it in or there was an actual shock that occurred, that will be captured and it'll just ask for a time. That will then say, all right, well, your next steps are A, B, and C, but it won't essentially stop them doing anything else. So it's not so onerous that the guys in the field would feel that it's a waste of time to fill in or it's onerous. So it's really a quick thing to record, but the details required to close out, obviously at each stage, you just add to those.
Yeah. So that's one of the little projects that we've been working on. So Sean, you're interested in whether this was in the Angular. Is that just because of the performance that you're seeing, or what
one
was
of the
your
problems
interest there?
like we have the case and you open up the embedded action within the case, or even the safety document within the case, but the load times are particularly long, and on a short, let's say, water meter, so definitely see the value, and that's awesome. But the guys, we have ranges between taking 30 seconds and substantially longer to load, which could be a range of issues from device connectivity, area, and all of those that we've got to look at.
Yes.
But from what I've seen in the Angular version, it does provide that capability and cultural change for the team that they'll be much more on board with it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Lockie, what safety are you covering off now? You've got the aggressive behaviour. You've got what other sort of safety items is now you've implemented or implementing, and think of implementing in the future?
These are the two direct ones. So the abnormal voltage and the aggressive customer. That's where there's an immediate risk to health. But there's
also, from a customer safety point of view, you've got the dialysis stuff as well.
Yeah. So we do have other ones that are indirect. So we're not so much concerned about the health and well-being of the workers. It's more of the community. So dialysis is probably the best example of that. If there is a dialysis patient that's within the area or is serviced by the shut-off block that we're working on, then again, that's a warning that pops up saying, look, you may have to shut down water. But if you do, you need to go and talk to this customer, you need to notify them, and you need to be aware that if you were to shut off their water, they may be mid-dialysis. So that's another example of where the warnings are really helping. Less health and safety, but in the same vein, is if it's been declared as a hot shut-off block. So essentially that's our indicator saying if we were to shut the water off, we would then have to pay out a GSL payment to everyone within that shut-off block. Same functionality, obviously not a safety issue, but it is something that's live and saying, well, based on the information that we have at hand, if you were to shut down this asset or assets in this area, then you're likely to disrupt a hot shut-off block, same as key customers. And the future one that we're looking for, and you can see that there's a box there in the middle, is no-go sewers. Again, they're currently flagged in our GIS that the sewers are no-go for varying reasons. So they may be operational, they carry significant flow, they might be a 3-metre pipe that's carrying essentially a river of sewage. They may be structurally unsound, or they may contain gas readings that we've seen over limit. The future of that is the same functionality where someone goes to site, they can record an over limit gas reading, would automatically flag it as a potential no-go sewer. If there's an existing no-go sewer register and someone needs to access their manhole, it will pop up and say, you're trying to access a no-go sewer, you need to go through these control measures to gain access. So we control that through our confined space entry process, but it's just another layer of just making the guys aware of what they're working with, because again, with our heavy industry in the area that we have out in the west of Melbourne, there could be galvanizers, there could be paint producers. We work downstream from hospitals and cancer institutes where we do have radioactivity issues. So we can flag them for any reason, but if they are on that register, then it's a way to pop it up.
Yeah, great. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, any questions around this? All good. Okay, another, I suppose, item that's related, which we're bringing across from, I suppose, cross-pollinating a little bit, is there's been some work on risk assessments. So Lockie is sort of helping out big time on that one as well. So we've had a couple of sessions on risk assessment from the fleet perspective, but we're certainly hoping to make it a generic enough process that it really can be used in various flavors within any of the apps. It's more really identifying what risk assessment is from a business process point of view and the recording process and how that really interacts with the field crew and or people actually performing that risk assessment. So I think we've got a reasonable, we've gone around in circles a couple of times and a couple of variations on just the presentation of what it represents. But then I think what we've been able to achieve in the last session was really hone in on the sort of what is risk assessment from a bit of a group think from that point of view. So we're hoping that we should have something fairly demonstrable in the next, definitely by the next water session, we'll have something then. But the basics of it are that we're going to have the ability to, in the water sense, have a pre-configured or pre-designed, in a fleet sense, a pre-configured risk assessment that would go against a type of asset, which would apply to any asset class, which really opens up with a series of questions and checks, which are really leading the professional, as it were, around that asset, just to make sure they don't skip something. That if it's a grader, we're going to cover off hydraulics and body and whatever else that sort of impact, human impact and all that sort of stuff. So that'll be essentially a checklist, but then the ability to really perform then a risk assessment on anything that's found within that. So it's really a checklist to remind someone that this is what they should be covering off, because that's what that asset is, and that's the potential we see in that group of assets and associated with that asset. But then the ability to actually raise a risk and classify, the severity of the risk, the likelihood of the risk, put it up into a risk matrix, identify any follow-up, any works that need to be done to correct it or to maintain that risk or identify that risk, and then record that against the asset. So then keep a risk register, both obviously across the whole organisation, but across each of those assets. So I suppose it's that combination of, having someone who knows what they're doing with a risk assessment, recording the details, obviously taking images and photos and all the rest of it around it, and then having up follow-up activity that'll close off that identified risk. Anything you'd like to sort of correct me, Lockie?
No, I think that's it. And I think when we move towards the water risk management, I think while we can do it at an asset level, that attribute information will definitely inform what level of risk we're working with, but also at an activity level. So being able to default, if you're doing activity A, well, do we have a standard set of questions? Does it involve confined space entry? Does it involve hot work? Does it involve this, and this? And the response to those questions would then lead you down to, well, if it does involve hot work, then have you filled in this permit? Yes, and you go down that way as well. So also the ability to relate and have that reference data, which is essentially the risk documentation or the standard operating procedures or swims that would be also related to that. So essentially, you could utilize it as a pre-start. What's the job you're doing based on the type of activity that's probably going to involve these types of work? If it does, what's next? So I think there's a massive opportunity there to make it as expansive as it could be. But you're right, if we start off with, I'm undertaking this task, here's essentially a data entry task, which is the risk assessment, and based on the actions that you've selected or based on the input, here's your pre-risk and here's your post-risk.
Yeah. And I think you're already doing some risk-based sort of specific process, I think with asbestos or something.
Yeah, so in terms of our asbestos clearance certificates, we have the ability to provide our own certificates. So if we're exhuming an old AC pipe, we will then go through the process of opening up. Have you done this? Have you done that? Yes, yes, yes. Collecting the information on the way through, collecting the information of the contractor who's moving the waste, the discharge area, and all that signed off. And we actually have, touch-enabled sign-offs as well. So it's all logic controlled. So you can't obviously create an asbestos certificate unless you have the permission to do so. And even things to the point where, provide a photo of the area pre. So that photo becomes a mandatory item that needs to be assessed, and it needs to be signed off by the accredited people. It's all stamped off and signed, or date stamped and signed at the end.
So do you see that some of those other other sort of certificates like that would then be incorporated into that risk assessment processes?
Definitely, yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's one of the benefits of Angular as well, where we'll be able to easily undertake the works and then generate a certificate from that. So we do have some instances, and again, specifically for AC, where we may need to we've done the work for a developer and we need to provide the developer with an AC certificate. So we've undertaken the work, we've put our name to it, and essentially you hit print at the end and it says, well, here's your certificate with all the information that you've already captured.
Right. Cool.
I was just going to see if I can pull one up to
I was going to say, if you can pull one up, that'd be great, Graham.
Yeah, just give us a second here.
If you want, Mark, we've got a very basic safety form that we do.
Yeah, well, we'd love you guys get involved in that in the next round, or when we meet next.
Cool.
Absolutely. Michelle and the fleet guys sort of met, but it'd be good to sort of widen the audience. That's for sure.
Sean, do you utilize it for permit to work type activities?
We don't really. No. So we got hot work permits, which the guys do, but we drive it on a behavior. If you're doing hot work, do the permit.
Yep.
So they select essentially from a list based on the activity they're doing. The safety documentation is also quite interesting if you stick it on an action or a case. And what we've generally done is we essentially just drive it through the behavior. If they're going to go do 4 water meters in one street, you do the safety document on the case, and then encompasses the risk for each of those actions, as opposed to every action doing one, because the risk assessment is likely to take longer than the minor and water meter replacement. So that's just some of the context of where we change it.
So I think that's a really good consideration, Mark, because we would definitely be in that same boat where we may have one case with 30 valve inspections, but they're all in the same property. So even if it was as simple as you create the risk assessment with the ability to multi-select the actions that would be covered under that risk assessment,
And I think, Lucky, we've got that. Essentially, it's related to our safety document. I was looking here. Where we relate all those actions to that safety document. So say, did you have a safety document for this action? Yes. When was it done? And we also have a couple of questions where they click, essentially, just a quick checklist. And then they get generate form, and based on the selections, it generates what mitigations they need to put in. And then just type a bit and save.
Perfect.
Low level, but it works pretty well.
I think that's a really good starting point there, Mark, because when we were saying, like, where do we start with the basics, it sounds like Sean's already covering a lot of those things, the identifying of the type of works that would require it, and if they do, then what do we need to fill out and how do we record it?
one of the biggest challenges we had was in terms of the content of the form. So I'm not sure if your safety section, so safety is sort of independent, but there's a lot of legislation rigmarole that goes around it. So we've had a lot of requests from the field guys to change it to make it, simpler and faster. But quite a high level engagement is needed in order to change some of these.
Has it been relatively? I mean, I know you went through a few cycles on those safety checks. Where do you think you've landed now with it then, Sean? Is it functioning reasonably well and you're getting the data back and the users are actually using it?
Yep. Yeah. So that's what I just checked off. And it's good to dig in. I was having a look at a few live environments here. And the guys are using it. So they are using all of them. We have all those records and everything's done.
Yeah.
There's still some complaints that, why do we have to tick all of this? But that's not so much an application. That's a business context of what we put in the form.
Right.
But
do you have one of those forms you could share with the group at all?
Yeah, I do.
Can you just share your screen? Oh, you've got to share permission.
I've just got to pick the right screen. There we go.
I've just sent you one too, Lockie. If
I've got that
because I can't
got that
show
ready
it.
to share once Sean's showing
Cool.
his.
Thanks for that.
Are you guys seeing my blank screen or the?
No, we're seeing
No,
the app.
Oh, good. Okay, everything's popped on different screens here. So this is essentially our case. I'm not going to scroll up because there's personal details on there. And we can see here's the general risk assessment which the guys have done. So they can access it from a case level here, like an action, or they can go on it here. So if we look at this risk assessment, I've just opened in a new tab. Essentially, so this is the risk assessment. This is what it's related to, who created it, when they last updated it. They then go, have you checked if this is a high risk activity? Yes, electrical hazard, site, So based on these selections, they go through and tick, 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 tick. These last one, any mitigations, then they create the form. So this then populates this table for each of the rows that they then got to complete. They would click on the row.
So that's the individual risk as identified above, is it, Sean?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yep. And then they would go in here and fill in, hazard, hot weather, consequence, moderate, Here's this sort of risk calculator as well.
Yep.
Then they save and continue on the next one. When all of these are done, they go back and go to the action. We also have action-related documents, which we haven't really stuck anything in yet, but this would be, specific guidelines or any content, PDFs that's relevant to the specific general risk assessment.
So for the overall, for that class of risk assessment, or for what's?
So for this specific risk assessment, so general risk assessment here.
Okay.
That any documentation will link directly to this one.
Yep.
And then we have I think we have a couple different ones depending on at the moment we haven't gone per asset. We've just gone by types. Like a MEC-ELEC will have a slightly amended risk assessment that they need to do for all our facilities, where the retake guys will follow something like this. A lot of similarities, but and then we also have some bigger ones for if you do, like if there's excavation permits and those type of things. We have different ones we pull out there.
Mm.
And I think they work really well with with pre-start or pre-shift checklist as well. So if there are generic ones that might cover off the whole day, like it's a hot day, have you got your sunscreen on? You don't want to be doing that for every job you turn up to. But if you have your pre-start saying, I'm ready to start work for the day, here's your basic questions, have you been drinking? Are you under the influence of drugs? No. All right. Is it hot? Do you have water? Do you have this? Yeah. Then that can, that can be taken into account for these as well. So you get to the first site, and because you've done your pre-start, then it recognizes that and says, well, I don't need to ask the whether it's hot question because you've already filled that out within the last X hours. But that's a really good start there, Mark. This is essentially what we were talking about.
This is which is where Paul did the work on that component, that the matrix and stuff.
Yeah.
Mm.
Which is what he's pulled together for that.
Yep, no, that's really good.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah. What sort of benefits did you get out of that, Sean, with the guys? Are they,
I'd probably need to talk to the operational guys to find out sort of what benefits they see. From a business perspective, if we get audited, it's quite easy to go back and say, here's our risk assessment. It's all in a list, readily accessible.
Yeah.
Previously, good luck, mate. It also, like, we have these are mandatory to fill in, so you can choose yes or no, but it then just acknowledges that yes, you did consider that risk when you started doing it. So, like, just prompts the thinking as well.
Yeah. 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 Cool. Did you have the grant? Did you have the AC?
I can bring that up.
Or Lockie?
How am I sharing? Here we go. Screen 2. Okay, why is that coming up as that? Can you see the AC certificate screen?
Yep.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, so essentially it's a very basic one, but it's obviously a very important one. So the way that we've set it up is that we need to sign off that an AC certificate has been undertaken. So if there's a third party that's actually undertaken the certificate, we can turn up on site and say, yep, we're happy that this has been done properly. We can just tick the capture third party certificate and we just register their number. It then asks for a copy of the certificate, and that's essentially all the questions that we need. If we are to undertake it ourselves, again, very basic but important questions. So we have to have a asbestos removal license. If it's yes, attach it. You can see here that the attachment itself is a mandatory field. So again, it doesn't stop them putting a picture of a dog or something there, but it is, you have to have something in there. So it's not possible to say, oh, I forgot. So is everyone trained? In here, they've actually selected no, so it won't have allowed. You'll see here that there is no certificate number provided because it hasn't met all the recommended criteria. It does allow you to attach their training evidence, which it looks like that they have done. The removal plan, whether there are any there's some basic yes/no questions, and then some photos of the site, obviously. Okay. Evidence of bagging and wrapping. That's what it looked like, obviously, before it was bagged and wrapped. License transporter, and then his details. So you'll have a picture of that, who the transporter was, and then the sign off by the people on site. So the auditor's sign off and the removals sign off. So this will be your person in control, and this will be the signature of the person who's taking it away. All the information's concatenated down the bottom so that you can see what's undertaken, and it's all made available there. If all of these are true and they meet those conditions, then we're able to create our own certificate number. And that's where I was saying in the Angular environment, we'll then be able to say, produce a certificate, and this will be printed out, and we'll be able to hand that to the developer or the other operators in the area.
Yeah, and just to that point about the Angular thing, that's because we're developing a new standard component that can generate customized PDFs. That'll be available once we have the upgrade, and we can generate formatted certificates.
Yep. And not even just for certificates as well, like basic printing. I'm not sure whether your guys have provided any feedback, Sean, but when you want to print off a case or an action, it's not always the prettiest. So the intention of that component that Grant's coming up with, or the Formbird's coming up with, is essentially, what do you want to see from this when I hit print, and where do you want it to be? So it'd nearly be a report builder functionality, that if you had someone with a bit of smarts, they'd be able to say, all right, when you hit this print button, this is the information that we want to see and how it's presented on that form.
Yeah, actually, I hit up Mark a couple of days ago asking, let's see this, because we have generate letter actions, which essentially we generate a letter, but which is the action that people do, and they do it in Word and attach it to someone else. We could bucket that all together, and there's so many applications in local government for generating letters. Yes.
Yeah, and even freedom of information requests as well. So if we've flooded someone's basin for whatever reason, and they say, well, this is the 4th time you've been here, we quite often have to provide case history. So yeah, the ability to print off, while it's way away from what we were talking about, but will be a benefit that we'll be able to get out of that one.
Yeah, that's awesome, huh?
Very good. Is there anything else? I'll stop sharing on that one.
Very good. Well, is there anything else that we'd like to chat today or cover off, or, you know, is there anything you'd like to be seeing in the future?
Lucky, have you guys done a scheduler? Because Andrew Young's been doing a bit of work on a scheduler for us.
We are, I'll need to see where exactly it is, but we definitely have the task to create the scheduler. And I know the thoughts on our scheduler were provided to you guys on how it would actually be done, but it is still our intention to provide that, even if it's a scheduler view. But definitely what we wanted to provide was the ability to make recommendations on where this should go based on the attributes of the job itself.
Yeah, okay.
This, you know, for, just the way that the prioritization's been working though at the moment is there's a bit more of a safety focus. So the scheduler's kind of dropped down a level in priority at the moment. So it hasn't quite made as much progress as we would have liked. And
that's our priority. That's not Formbird's priority.
Yeah.
That's internal to GWW, where they've made the decision to go in a separate way than some of the existing tasks that we had. But would definitely be interested in seeing how you guys are progressing your scheduler and whether there's any thoughts or input that we could provide or we could take from you guys.
Yeah, it's a pretty basic version, but Tony's done some good work. Anthony Kirk, yeah. But maybe I think I've got a demo with Andrew next week. But maybe Mark, if you wanted to, I could share it with Lucky. It's pretty simple.
No, always happy to see what you guys are up to, and it's always one of those ones where, you know, we don't want to be both developing the same thing, you know, concurrently, but in two different directions. So if we can kind of design it with each other in mind, then obviously the shareability will be there for both of us.
In the background, we've also been doing some work on some optimisation and rescheduling and replanning of work, so that you can have a schedule, but then when a responsive job comes in, re-optimise, you know, based on crew availability and machinery that's needed and skills and so forth, and locations of jobs, and re-optimise. So we've been sort of working that as a bit of a project. It's close to being able to be demonstrated. It still needs a bit more work, just so we can kind of get the thinking going, you know, amongst the professionals there. But
Cool. Josh O from Central Highlands, any questions? You found this useful popping in today?
Yeah. For us, there's just so many steps from where we're at. So it's really informative for me. And I'm sort of looking at putting forward a business case for field mobility solutions and things like that. So no specific questions, but it has been really good for me. Thank you.
Yep, great. Excellent. So
I suppose, Josh, if you do want to reach out to myself for how we do it here at GWW, happy to always have a chat. So if you...
Awesome. Thanks, Lockie. Appreciate it.
No worries.
Linda, Anthony, anyone else that's interested in chiming in?
It's all good. It's been great, actually. Thank you.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Lockie and Sean, for keeping my mouth shut.
Only a pleasure, Mark.
It's better to have someone competent talk than someone incompetent. It's all good. I suppose only a few other little bits and pieces that's been going on, just sort of information. We've got again, it's just sort of throwing it out there. We do have Michelle at Bundaberg playing around with a reporting server that's on-prem, essentially, that's replicating the fleet data on there. We have also done the water data, but Sean hasn't had any time to do anything yet, so Michelle's running with it, which is fine. We'll have one R&D team up in Bundaberg going and figuring out what they, and so they're connected. I think it's using Power BI, Microsoft Power BI. So
have they had a win on that?
Sorry?
Have they had a win? So the database is replicating in our AWS environment and we can pull from it?
Yep.
Okay, so now I can copy paste. Good.
No, we'll wait until Michelle's working on just how she wants to do what she wants. I don't think she's actually had a whole heap of time, because I did threaten that she'd be presenting at one of these things and she went very quiet. But she said, yeah, she's still sort of just refining what they want to do. So what we're doing there is we're basically taking the data from the primary server and, you know, from the hosted environment and pulling it straight down into what is essentially on-prem. It is on a AWS server, but essentially it's within the Bundaberg environment. It's actually shifting technologies. It's going from our Mongo down to Couchbase, which is what it has is quite a nice, well, not quite nice, but a different language interface, which is far closer to a SQL interface, which obviously goes very well with the Power BI sort of model because it's a SQL based sort of language model. You know, we're seeing a lot more NoSQL kind of reporting tools and that coming out too. So there's a whole lot of stuff moving in that space that we'll see over the next sort of 6, 12, 2 years, whatever. There's a whole lot of people now more focused on that, the other technology. So there'll be more reporting capabilities moving forward as well. Yeah, so really our focus over the next couple of months is really bedding down the Angular, obviously continuing the growth of some of those components and new components, the risk assessment and risk management, which is going across, you know, multiple apps and multiple environments, and really anything else that you guys feel that we should start heading towards. You know, there's obviously lots of opportunities in terms of pulling in data or pushing data or what have you, but yeah, one thing at a time.
Cool.
Any questions to us?
Mike, you just get Angular app. That's
okay. Yeah, see, I've just lost a little bit more hair, you know, sort of it's going back faster and faster.
No, cool. This has been good.
I guess the good news is that we're doing heaps and heaps and heaps of testing in GWW, so it'll be very well sorted by the time you see it.
Good.
Yeah. Ozwater. Is anyone going to Ozwater?
Likely.
Sorry?
I'm likely going.
Likely.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what our status is. Normally a few people go up, but it tends to be over the last couple of years the team leaders that are going rather than the engineers. So if we were represented, I'm not sure who would be doing the representation.
Yeah. No worries. It's in. I think Paul's popped up the dates, May 26th or whatever. Anyway, we'll keep.
Where is Ozwater this year?
Bris Vegas.
Oh,
Yeah.
book that one in.
You can start working on the funding, Lockie.
Yeah.
Guys, I've got to head off.
Okay, guys. Yep. No, all good.
Thanks.
We've stuck within the hour, which is good. And thanks, everyone. Very good.
Awesome.
Talk soon.
Thanks all.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.